Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth, and thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's episode and also tuning in to help support the podcast. As every week I'm sharing a new episode, just sharing words and thoughts of hopes, inspiration, and motivation to hopefully bring value into your world today, as I'm just sharing things that I'm going through on my own crazy ride that we call life. So thank you once again for being here. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is perhaps one of the reasons you might be struggling to eat a little bit healthier, right? If that is your goal, is to get healthy, and why you might be struggling. And I think one of the biggest things comes down to you're not tracking your food in some kind of food tracker, right? Because what doesn't get tracked will not get measured. And you've set out on a goal to become healthier. It's the only way to know if you're getting closer to your goal or further away from it, right? Now, depending on what your goal might be, you might want to put on some weight or you might want to cut out some weight. You know, those daily calories and macros, which is your proteins, your carbs, and your fats, they're going to look different. And if you're not even sure of what those are, one of the best ways you can do is just go get your numbers. You can find them on different apps or websites. The most commonly used one is If It Fits Your Macro. And you pretty much just put in some information such as your age, your sex, right? How active you are, what your actual goal is, whether it is to bulk up or cut. And from there, you'll get some numbers, right? And none of those are set in stone. You kind of have to play around with them to see, what works. But they give you a good baseline on where to start to show you how many calories you should be consuming, how many grams of protein, fats, and carbs in a day you should be consuming to get you closer to your goal. So we start there. But again, on the journey to become healthier, nutrition is absolutely the most difficult part. And it's because throughout the day, we have many, decisions that we are making as to the foods that we're consuming, right? And there's a lot of these obstacles that can get in the way of us making a healthier choice. Conveniency, a lot of times temptations, right? Like craving, sweet tooth, and things like that. But I think one of the biggest factors is if you just don't know your numbers, it's hard to gauge where you're at to see what you need to adjust to get you closer to your goal, or those numbers will get you further away. And so I believe it's really important that if the goal is to become healthier on whatever side it is that you're trying to achieve a goal on, it's super important to track your numbers, right? Because it's going to tell you what's going on. It'll help you see what you need to adjust. If your goal is to lose weight, and you're not tracking, you don't know how much over, calories you're consuming that are leading you to put on more weight. And so it's the only way to really, really know. And so, like I said, it's a big struggle. It's one of the biggest things that I've struggled to myself. But I personally have found that once I've started to actually track my macros and become more intentional about the foods that I'm consuming and logging those into my app, what it really does is just open your eyes to really understand foods a little bit more in depth. Because a lot of times you don't realize, just how many calories and how many grams of fats, carbs, proteins, such foods items are just by knowing. But when you use an app and you input those food items, they give you an idea of how many calories per serving, how many grams of fats, carbs, all your macros. So it helps give you some guidance as to measure, again, the different foods that you eat and to know what things are, getting you closer or it could be things that are getting you further away from, your goal. And just as an example, right? Like when you're eating a bag of chips, when you see in the back of that package, it'll say 150 calories, right? And it doesn't mean generally 150 calories for the entire bag. That's not what that means. What it will break down on the nutritional facts is 150 calories per 10 to 12 chips, let's say. And I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time I only ate 10, 12 chips in a bag of chips, right? you're using going handfuls and handfuls, not even thinking about it because it's so easy to consume many. So if you're not paying attention to how many calories you're eating per serving in that example, you can blow through 45, 50 chips in a matter of minutes. And that 150 calories, for 10 to 12 chips, 3-4 servings later has now become, 400-500 calories, right? And when you've got 24 hours in a day where you're consuming food generally, those calories can be spent very quickly. And so that's one of the biggest things that I've gotten from starting to really become more intentional about tracking, is it really opens up your eyes to get a better idea of what the food costs you energy-wise for the day. Because if you have a goal and there are certain numbers associated with a goal to hit that, then you want to make sure that you're spending it wisely. It's no different than if you set a budget for yourself, right, to only spend so much because you're trying to save for this and that. There's only one way for you to understand how much you're spending and how much you're saving to know whether you're getting to that goal or not. And it's by tracking the amount of money that you spend. And so it's no different than tracking our foods. If we set a certain number that's going to hit us towards a certain goal, the only way for us to know if we're close or far away from that is by tracking. Now, you're not always going to get it perfect, right? You're not going to eat every meal spot on, but I'm telling you, I've become a lot more consistent with, tracking my foods. And what it really allows me to do is really help me stay on top of those calories that I'm consuming to get to the goals that I have. Because when I'm in there tracking it, right, I get to see how much I'm eating in a day and to see if I'm over or under those goals. And I'll just show you as an example, right? So right now I'm consuming roughly about 2,200 calories in a day. And this is just one of my days and what it looks like for me to track. And as if you see there, everything has a number associated to it, right? I've got my breakfast, my snacks, my lunch, my dinners, and everything in there has a certain amount of calories, per serving, and depending on how many servings I eat. And so with that, I'm able to go through the entire day and see, am I on target to the goal that I've set for the calories and macros that I'm supposed to be consuming to get closer to my goal? Am I under? Am I over? Did I come close? And what I've noticed too is, your goals only become serious as seriously as you take them. And so if you have an overall goal to become healthier, right, the more intentional actions we take to track and measure that progress, the more seriously we will take those goals, And so, as I said, you're not going to hit every day, but, most days you will be able to, get your goals, right? Like, there are some days that I've missed my macros and putting in my information, but I've got a lot of the days here where you can see that I track them. And so, again, I believe that if you're struggling to get healthier, to start consuming healthier foods, I think the principles of just tracking your foods and into an app, that's the foundation of all this, is to understand numbers, to understand food portions and sizing and servings and calories and what they all mean. And, what again it does, I believe most of all, is if you're really just starting, right? If you really want to see what a normal day of you looks like, if you're just starting this journey of becoming healthier, if you just track a week, I'm using this Trainerize app. There's another app called MyFitnessPal. The reason I use this Trainerize app is because I've hired a coach here this year who's helping me with my fitness and my nutrition, right? And so I'm in that app, and my trainer is able to see those calories. He adjusts those calories as we need to adjust, and so forth. But that's the one I'm using. But another important thing here too is sometimes the best thing you can do is ask somebody for help, right? To reach out to somebody who can maybe help guide you through that process of understanding your macros and how to calculate those and help you, right, with like tracking your foods, right? Because a lot of times it's not that we don't know what to do, because in the day and age we've got all the stuff that's on live. Now AI is just making it that much easier for us to track or find information of things that we need to learn to understand about. And so it's not that we don't know what to do, but a lot of times the best thing that we can do is have someone in our corner who keeps us accountable, who we say, hey, these are goals that I have. These are things that I want to accomplish. And I need someone to help me keep accountable because I'm so busy with so many things. And I would like, check in with someone and be like, hey, this is how my week went. I could have improved or I struggled here. And sometimes the best thing you can do, and that's why I've hired a coach, right, to help me in my corner, to keep me accountable, right? Which ultimately leads me to making sure I'm on top of these things because I've got me with my coach weekly and discuss, how my progress went, how I'm feeling with my macros, my foods, did I hit my goals for the week, all of that. And it's by far one of the best things I could have done. And I encourage everybody, whether you're on that journey and you're struggling or you're just starting, right, is to reach out to somebody who could just help hold your hand through the process, because it's a lot easier when you have people there to support you in your corner, to help guide you, just to be there as support, as you're embarking on your journey or again, continuing a journey that you're struggling on. So that's why I use that app. But there's other free ones too out there, such as MyFitnessPal, which I've used for a very long time. There are some features in there that you can upgrade that you really don't need. The free version of it will get you all the stuff that you need to track your meals with. But I can't stress on how important I believe this is. And, especially if you're starting a health journey or you're struggling to eat healthier foods, this is the best way to do it. And most importantly, like I said, going back to, if you're just starting it, this is such an eye opener because when you're first using it, without changing anything in your diet and the foods that you're consuming, right? If you just log in all your foods that you're eating every day to the best of your ability and track for a few days or a week, it'll open up your eyes to realize how much more you are actually consuming in calories than you think, because again, by the time you eat so many chips, you're already at like 400 or 500 calories, that on top of the sodas that we drink, the other junk food, the fast food, which is like 1,300 calories, right? For a Big Mac, large fries, and a soda, et cetera, et cetera. If you have a goal to, let's say your goal is going to be about 2,300 calories and so forth, you can be shooting over this, right? By 1,000 or 2,000 calories, like no joke, is a very eye-opener when you start to track your foods, especially if you're just getting on board with this journey of becoming healthier, to see what you just normally eat in a day, right? And then start to eat healthier and track those foods. And it opens up your mind to really see, how much you're actually consuming in calories. And then the light bulb will click like, oh, this is why, I'm not healthy right now. Because when I'm eating in a day is like 3,500, 3,600 calories. And if I put my numbers in those websites and it says in order to get healthy and to get a certain goal, I should probably be about 2,100 calories or 2,200 calories. And so it's a definite eye opener. But like I said, for me, it really helps me a lot because I know when I'm not tracking, I don't know how much I'm putting in my mouth, right? Like I've learned a little bit more now, so now I do have a better understanding of certain things and how much calories and roughly how much protein I'm getting in a lot of different things. But, ultimately, when I track in the app, it's the best way for me to keep myself accountable because I got to go back and reflect on this thing, right? And so if I'm eating junk food all the time and I'm putting junk food in there and my day is full of junk food, I'm not going to feel the greatest knowing that I'm on a journey to become healthier and all I see is chips and soda and ice cream, and et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to make me feel pretty good. And so it helps keep me accountable and it makes me feel good when I can go and track my food in there and I see on the day to day, okay, what did I have for breakfast? I had some eggs, some egg whites, some broccoli, perfect. What did I have for snack? I had a high protein yogurt. I had 12 ounces of non-fat Greek yogurt with some whey protein in there. All right, what was my lunch? Cool. I had like 200 grams of brown rice. I had a diet soda or a 0-calorie soda, 0 sugar with, 8 ounces of ground turkey. When I see a day full of that, I'm like, okay, sweet. Like we're attacking our goals. We did good today. And so going back to the beginning of this conversation, if you're struggling with the food and consuming better food, this is where you gotta start, right? Tracking your app, tracking your foods in an app, because what doesn't get tracked won't get measured. When you become more intentional, when you become more intentional about your goals and how serious you want to take them, by taking action with things that are going to help you get there, you'll be surprised how much more it pushes you to get closer to the goals. Because when you're serious about the actions that you take, towards the goals that you want, then you take them more seriously, because you're now investing more time into doing this and doing that and seeing this and seeing that. And so, again, you're not going to be perfect, but for me, I've been a lot more consistent, and, a lot more days I'm able to get in there. And now, because what you find is once you start using it more often, right, you start getting better, start getting quicker, at using it. And especially for me, because I do meal prep, right? And so I meal prep a few days at a time. And so I'll log my entire week in this, app tracker in like 10 minutes, and it's because I'm eating a lot of the regular same kind of carbs and proteins and stuff like that. And so I can quickly know what food item to look up, and you become more efficient with how you use it. And, some of these are great because they do have food scanners. So you might be able to type in the food thing, or you can use a scanner to scan barcodes for food items. Or even if you go to the restaurants, there's features in there that you can use to give you an idea of, if you got to eat out, but you still want to eat in a healthier side and track your macros, give you an idea of what certain food items at restaurants are. So, this is to say, once again, if you're struggling with trying to consume healthier foods, I truly believe that tracking it is an absolute must, and is the foundation of becoming healthier to whatever goal it is that you have, because there's just no way of knowing how many calories you're eating, and calories are what tell us if we're getting closer to goals or not, and they are the baseline of us, knowing what we need to consume in everyday caloric needs to get to a certain goal. And without knowing those numbers and without tracking those numbers, then if we're eating all day, we have no idea if we're over, if we're under, or if we're right on track, And so since I've done this, it's helped me a lot more on my journey with becoming healthier, for me actually using my app. So I hope this helps you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. And as always, I will see you on the next one.